Hi, I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, host of Highly Sensitive Money. I'm a money coach, certified financial planner, and a highly sensitive person who brings money and social justice together. If you're someone who feels deeply, can endlessly think through how one decision affects everything else, or has ever struggled with all the things that traditional financial thinking leaves out, you're in the right place. In this show, I chat with highly sensitive people on how they handle their money, and with money experts on how they cultivate social justice in their work. Questions? Please go to allthecolors.net and schedule a free 30-minute call. And I'm happy to share resources on investment management, money coaching, workshops, or anything else money and social justice related. Join us in this episode as we explore money and sensitivity while honoring that all of our well-being is interconnected. Today, Genet Gigi Jimba shares how a simple quarterly money check-in with her partner revealed she was donating with one hand while investing against her beliefs with the other, and how that realization sparked her podcast, Progressive Pockets. We explore practical tools for aligning saving, spending, giving, and investing with our values. From Gigi's diversity lottery roots to the trade-offs of the American dream, we look at abundance alongside debt, independence alongside isolation, and reframe wealth as stewardship and relationship, not just accumulation. As sensitive people, we name the overwhelm that can come with seeing these contradictions, and we offer grounded practices for pacing, boundaries, and sustainable care while you realign your money, one honest adjustment at a time. If you've ever felt the cognitive dissonance of loving waffle fries from a brand that bankrolls the opposite of your beliefs, this conversation will feel like a map, more than a verdict. Well, welcome, Gigi, to Highly Sensitive Money. I'm really thrilled to have you as a guest today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
In preparation for our conversation, I've been listening a lot to your podcast, Progressive Pockets, and I've kind of skipped around. I went to how you inform people about how to find a financial advisor that's values aligned. I listened a lot to your conversations on Martin Luther King and the Poor People's Campaign. I learned about how Islam gives, what was it called? Zudak?
Yes. I mean, it's like fascinating because it's all of these religious laws around giving. Yes. Zakat.
Yeah, zakat. And I just love how informative your podcast is. So, Gigi, it's been a joy to be listening to your podcast. And I remember what a joy it was to meet you in person. We met, I think it was 2 years ago. Next month, it'll be 2 years ago at FinCon in New Orleans, the city with the best food. And I was hosting, it was my first time at FinCon. And they have invitations to like host the conversation that you want to have. And I wanted to talk about social justice. As an investment manager, that's where I focus my work. As someone who left the very traditional financial advising into going to money coaching, like this was the reason that I wanted to do it. And that meetup was the highlight of the event. I've stayed in touch with quite a bit of people, a handful of people. Earlier this year, I had Janine Firpo as a guest. Now I have you. And I just, sometimes when you think of the FinCon group, social justice is not usually often a big part of it. So it wasn't surprising that the majority, like a large portion of the people who were at the social justice meetup were people of color, because we are directly impacted by social justice and by money. And your podcast gives really important, strong information and very digestible snippets, right? It's like 15 minutes. And you always say, if you want to learn more, here's podcast 93, here's podcast 7, so people can go into the rabbit hole within their level of tolerance. And also in listening to you, I'm like, I think we have a fellow highly sensitive here. I'll tell you specifically what points I was like, Gigi is also sensitive around this particular issue. I can tell you that later on. But before we go to that, I want to hear your story. How did you become the host of Progressive Pockets? What was it that made you pick up the microphone and share what you were learning? But even before that, highly sensitive people, I like myself love context. What made you even be interested? A lot of people just turn away from this topic because it's hard. What made you be interested in it?
Thank you so much, Deanna. First of all, it is just so nice to be here. Thank you for listening to the show as well. Thank you very much. As you know, podcasting can sometimes feel like a lonely experience. Sometimes it feels like talking into the void. I mean, you see the download numbers, you know that people are listening, you know it on a rational level, but it's a treat today to also just be able to dialogue back and forth because mine is a solo show. So the episodes are always me researching for a long time a topic and then coming and giving a 10-15 minute chat about that topic. And sometimes the research can really be, interviewing 2 or 3 experts, reading 1 or 2 books about the topic, going online, learning what I can find out. So this is really fun for me today to be able to come on here and actually have a dialogue with you.
I love that. I love it. It's like we're getting a behind the scenes of like, how does it get made?
Yes. And the brevity is just something that it's just my personality. I was that kid in school who would ask, what's the minimum number of words my essay can be? And my essay was always exactly that many words. My thesis in grad school, it's just, I don't know what it is about my communication style, but I usually tend to be brief. It's funny that you mentioned meeting in FinCon because I just got back from FinCon a few days ago. So for those who are listening and are not familiar, FinCon is a really cool conference for content creators in the personal finance space. And as you can imagine, there's a huge diversity of people and values that show up to a conference like that. And so the social justice meetup that Deanna put together for us was just a huge blessing because she created a community within a community where a lot of us were meeting each other and saying, oh, there was like this exhale. I found my people. This is my community within FinCon. These are going to be my friends. These are going to be my collaborators. These are going to be my inspiration. So it really, I have to say thank you, Deanna, because, in our communities, we really do need the gatherers, if that's a word, the people that bring us together. And I, just like you said, have maintained some relationships since that time. In fact, to the point that I was one of the co-organizers of the social justice meetup last week.
I was going to ask. I'm so glad to hear that it's still going. I know it happened. I mean, so we met 2023. I know it happened 2024. I'm thrilled to hear that in 2025, you guys are still making it happen. I love that.
Yeah. It has been amazing. And once again, it's that same exhale. I found my people. And I love that. What a community. So thank you for bringing us together. So yeah, how did I get into this? Like a lot of things, it was, and maybe this is part of being a sensitive person, which I can't wait to hear your observations about that. But a lot of things kind of came together for me, and there was like a swirling of information in my mind and my heart that kind of crystallized at some point. So one thing that happened was, it was during, I will call it the racial reckoning in America in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. And, one thing that happened was I love to give financially. This is a part of my culture. I'm an Eritrean American person. Giving is as natural as earning and receiving money. It's just money flows very freely in my community and in my culture. And so giving has just been from the beginning a part of my financial experience. But I did want to do a little bit of like a spring cleaning or some kind of a shakeup that summer of the racial reckoning. I wanted to take a look and see, where am I giving? Am I giving enough? Can I give more? Maybe I'm overlooking some places that could really use my support. And through my research, I found some pretty cool places to give that I was not aware of before. And one part of my process was asking my friends and family, my former colleagues, former classmates, where do you give? And do you feel good about it? And the number one response that I got back was, oh my goodness, this is something I've been wondering too. Can you let me know what you found out? And I was surprised by that because a lot of people in my community have either worked in nonprofits or studied nonprofits, or I don't know, they're just like public sector people. And so it surprised me that a lot of people were asking the same questions I was. So that's part one. That's one thing that happened at that time. A second thing that happened was during that summer of racial reckoning. It was so my partner and I used to have this really wonderful practice of once a quarter checking in with each other on our money. And, it very simple. How much did we make? How much did we save? How much did we invest? How much did we give away? And for some reason that day, the order of the check-in, I think we talked about our giving. We did earning and then we went giving. And the next category was investments. And something about that, it just clicked that we are donating with one hand towards some causes that we believe in. But then with the other hand, we are investing in, let's say, corporations that are actively working against those values. And it was one of those like aha moments. And so I think it just all kind of came together of going through a journey of, first of all, sharing more of what I was learning about different ways to give, different ways to think about giving, different places to give, but then also taking a step back and doing that bigger picture, like, what are we doing with our money in general? Does it line up with what we believe and who we are and what we want, for the planet and for our people? So it's so funny. I started off by saying, oh, I'm so brief, but that was a very long answer to the inspiration for Progressive Pockets.
Okay. And I am not brief. So if I push you over towards the more, I don't know, full context version, I am very happy about that. So what I'm hearing is that you had this lovely check-in and you looked at giving, you saw, what about my investing? Yeah. How is that going? And I'm thinking too, like there's a podcast I listened to about private prisons and how sometimes unbeknownst to us, we're investing in private prisons. So there's so much work that needs to be done in our finances. And I mean, it doesn't have to be done overnight, but it's a little bit of like, where is my curiosity, following that, and then just becoming acquainted with the topic, not being afraid of the topic. So here's kind of like the initial spark of what got you onto this journey. Tell us more. How did it continue?
Yeah, exactly. And, it was like investments. And then I started to just learn and learn and learn. And it might have been Janine Firpo's book, which you've had her on your show before. It might have been her book where she starts off by saying, what about your cash at the bank? And that is just not something I had ever really thought about. But the more that I learned, I found out that the banks can leverage our money up to 9 times. So for every dollar that I have in the bank, $9 is having an impact on the world. And so it was like the peeling back of like layers of understanding. And I don't claim to be an expert, and I don't even aspire to be an expert on this, but really Progressive Pockets is kind of like a learn with me type of a vibe. And I think at this point in my life, I'm just a lot more gentle and practical and realistic with my suggestions. Maybe in my 20s, maybe I would have had more of like a burn it all down type of energy. But I think, my audience is sort of curious about these topics, but probably not super aware of just how much power our money really has. So it's really that beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, it's a place to start getting information and all the summaries, all the research that you've done. I love that. And for me, as I was listening to it, because I work in this field, I've been interested in this for a while. And I came into investments not really believing that it was possible to bring your values and investments together. And then having the good luck, like honestly, good luck. I was not looking to now work at a firm, Natural Investments, that's what they're about. 40 years, I think it's been about 40 years, maybe a little bit more, that they've been the trendsetters. And this is kind of like shameless self promotion, but in the past week or so, working with Janine Furpo, seeing what she needed for Invest for Better, Natural Investments has been having this like heart rating for investments for different mutual funds and ETFs. And it was like 300 places that they had evaluated. They had like the heart rating, but also community investing and a couple of different things, like a simpler version of As You Sow. And I asked them, can you segment it into different parts of what a portfolio need? Can you segment it into small cap, international, large cap? Like what are the if you're thinking of like a recipe for a portfolio? And I think this must have been maybe 2 months ago that I asked for this, and they just told me in the past couple of weeks that they're like, okay, yes, we can finish making it. We can finish doing this research because it's a place for people who are DIY, which is a lot of what the FinCon community is. Here's another resource. Here's another place where you can go and get information and where it's more segmented to exactly what you need.
I love that. And the fact that you said that this is not brand new. I mean, you're building on it, you're creating a simpler tool, a more accessible tool. But if for 40 years this group of people has been doing this work, it's just, I think sometimes it's going back to our roots. And I know from having met you in the past and talked with you that you are part of the Quaker community. Is that right? Yes.
Definitely. And I have, yeah,
Exactly.
sorry.
Yeah. And so I think it just connects back, speaking of going back to a legacy of doing this work, and that it's not a new idea to align your money and your values. I think the Quaker community is an amazing example of that.
I know there were definitely back when there was still enslavement in the U.S. I mean, not that private prisons aren't enslavement, but the previous version that we had, Quakers, there was a division amongst them that there were some Quakers who were not going to use anything that had been produced by enslaved people. And there was another group that was a little bit slower to adopt, so even within the Quaker community, it can take a while for something to become mainstream, but there's often the people at the fringes that are like, I can see what this means. And there's contradiction, there's pain that we're causing. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of highly sensitive people tend to be the ones to see that tend to be amongst the first to see that. One of the analogies I've heard about highly sensitive people is that we're often the canary in the coal mine. We're in the system, we sense that it's toxic, and we're the first to fall, which is not a great way. But because of the sensitivity, you can see what the discrepancy is and say it out loud.
That is so okay. That I'm learning so, as always, I'm learning so much from just hearing you talk about the connections between being a highly sensitive person and money. That is very interesting. But I also know that this is like a newer realization for you. I think you said about being a highly sensitive person. Did you say that was within like the last 5 years that you kind of discovered that?
Yes. The first time someone asked me was actually during the pandemic. And I was like, that sounds weak and feminine. No, that's not me. And then the term kept coming up. And it was a few months before attending FinCon the first time that I was really letting it seep into me, and also recognizing that a lot of the people that I served probably were also highly sensitive. They also needed more metaphors. They also needed more context. They were being more affected by the pain that we saw money causing, right? So if you see money as a tool of harm, people aren't going to want to engage with it. and helping transform it to at least make it either be neutral or be a tool for good started to become more and more important because of the firm where I was working, because of being Quaker, and also seeing that it was possible, that the change could be made with money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because it kind of makes me think about my own relationship with money and my own, like what motivates me with money. And I have to say, there are definitely people in the world who are motivated by just creating a big pile of money. And then from there, their motivation is how big can the pile get? And that just has never resonated with me. And I've listened to interviews with millionaires, maybe even billionaires, and they talk about their motivation. And it's so fascinating that for some of those people, they see the size of your pile of money as a measure of their achievement, as a measure of their success, maybe their self worth, maybe the amount of quote unquote impact they've had on community and on our society. And it never worked for me. But when I started to think about money as a tool to help, boy, did that change my relationship, because now I actually felt more motivated to try to actually earn money. Before then, it just kind of felt like, okay, it's something I need to live to pay for my needs, but not really. I don't know. It just didn't really attract and motivate me. I'm wondering if you have found in your exploration of being sensitive and money, is there are there any trends you've seen or like correlations between what kind of motivation, what motivates highly sensitive people when it comes to money, either engaging with it or earning more or being a better steward of money? Is there any connection you've seen?
I don't know. I would need to probably do a large survey to like really feel confident saying like, here's a trend that I see. What I do, I think it's just going to be similar to what the general population is, right? Some people see it as a source of safety. If I have a big pile of cash, then I can care for my needs and care for my family's needs, right? That can be a big part of it. It could be, I think it's just going to be a reflection of what you see. So honestly, I haven't
Mm-hmm.
looked at that research, and similar to you, it's like I want to research everything before I say this is what I see. Yeah.
And even that is so interesting when you say, some people find money to be security. They see it as safety. It's so interesting because, I did not grow up with money, or let me say, I didn't grow up with much money. And my reaction to that has sort of been, well, I've seen that I can be happy when I don't have money. And I've seen that I can be happy with more money. And it doesn't, I mean, after you get your basic needs met, there hasn't been a big correlation for me. And so I don't fear not having money as much. But I've known people where it's had the opposite reaction. Growing up with not quite having enough has really triggered almost like a hoarding or a desire to hoard, to make a safety padded blanket around themselves to be able to feel more safe.
And I think it very much goes along, like when we think that we're very separate, that your well-being has nothing to do with my well-being, then it can be easy to think like, well, as long as I have enough money, good luck to you, you know? And maybe that's what a lot of
Seriously.
billionaires and millionaires think.
Seriously. And, having been someone that has, like, I came to this country as a refugee, so I've, and then achieved the quote unquote American dream, did the schooling, got the prestigious job. So I've kind of been in both situations. I have relied on government assistance in the past, and then I've also been a person that's been able to assist other people. And I think that it's just so interesting the different ways that people kind of react to that scarcity or abundance. When you talk about community, this is like a new thought I've had over the past maybe 5 years or so, but I am developing this hypothesis that I think we were more, I'm talking about my family of origin, that we were more connected when we were not as well resourced, that we had to rely on our community more than we do now. And I think that's kind of sad. I think that we have lost something in some way, being a little bit more independent, being more financially secure. It doesn't have to be a trade-off for community, but in my immigrant experience, I feel like it's like an emerging hypothesis that I have. I'm still kind of studying the past and collecting data, but it's something that I'm thinking about these days.
That makes me think of there's a book called Money and the Meaning of Life by Jacob Needleman. And I believe Jacob Needleman was like a pastor. Like he was someone more in the religious vein of thought than like a money vein of thought. And what I'm remembering from his book, one of his theories was that as you have more money, you don't need to have as much reliance on God or community
Mm.
or others, right? That there is the fiction that having a big pile of cash will protect you. And that there were even communities that were against insurance because by having insurance, you were protecting yourself against God's will, right? Like if God wanted your house to burn down, maybe there was a reason for it. And having insurance and protecting yourself from it was not following his plan or their plan, whatever that was. So that's like a part of it, the way that he saw it. But when I think at the end of the day, it's a fiction though, because you can have all the money in the world and still not have not be able to provide for cares that money can't care for, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's so much more to a human than having food and shelter. We also need a sense of belonging. We need community. We need meaning, purpose. Money can only like solve money problems. And I imagine that your experience that you're living through of your family shifting as there's more financial independence likely is the experience for many people who move into more financial comfort, right? But also moving into a more individualistic culture. I don't know a lot
Mm-hmm.
about Eritrea, but I imagine that it's more collective than the US. And there's pros and cons to everything. I actually want to like give a little teaching on highly sensitive people. The term was first researched by Ellen Aron, and she was doing research on how highly sensitive people in individualistic communities are actually able to see both sides, how the benefits of being individualistic and the benefits of being collectivist, more than people who are not HSPs. So as a highly sensitive person, it's easier to like step ourselves outside of our structure of what we learned and see what the benefits and downfalls are from it, because there's also negatives of being in a collectivist culture, right? Neither of them has figured it out 100%. Yet, by being aware of what the positives are from both, maybe we can continue those. Maybe we just need to like, okay, so because we're now in an individualistic culture, this is likely to happen. And there's things that we can do to pause it, to slow it down, to be aware of it, to change it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true what you say about the trade-offs too. I think we don't talk about the negatives of becoming more financially secure. I mean, it almost sounds even crazy to say that out loud. And it's not meant to be a one of these romanticizing of poverty type of BS conversations. But even when I think about my immigrant experience, it's like, yes, I was able to immigrate to the US. Actually, I won the diversity visa lottery when I was a baby, along with my family. Yes. And so yes, we experience the quote unquote American dream. I can never say it without the quotation marks because there's something that's lost too. Yes, we came to this land of abundance, better access to healthcare, better access to education, and a little bit more freedom in terms of different ways that you can live your life and be yourself. Speaking of individuality, at the same time, though, I will never forget the first time that we went to go visit my family back in Eritrea. And I think that was the first time I was confronted with here's what the trade off was. My cousins did not have access to this like healthcare and education and opportunities that I mentioned earlier. At the same time, I have to say, they were a lot more rooted in our culture. They were a lot more rooted in community. And even just from like a mental health standpoint, I really feel that, I don't know, there's something a little bit unnatural about the way that we're living in the US, the way that you're expected to do everything yourself and be everything. Your individual family unit is meant to be like this self-contained, independent entity that does not rely on, and it's just not in flow. It's not, your individual family unit in the US sometimes doesn't feel as in flow with the rest of your community as what I observed when I went back to Eritrea for the first time. So there's a real trade-off. I think that it has been really a blessing to be able to have a little bit of skepticism about, what it's been like to earn the degrees and earn the money and kind of achieve this American dream. It's really, I'm so glad that maybe, and now I'm learning from you that part of the awareness comes from being a sensitive person, a highly sensitive person. But I'm really grateful for being able to have a nuanced understanding that continues to grow every year.
Yeah. And for myself, I grew up on the border between my parents' home country of Mexico and my own in the US. And now that I spend such a large portion of my time back in Mexico, it can be really hard to say, like, here are the differences. One of the things that I do sense here in the US, though, I'm in the US right now, is the sense of rushing. There's just so much more rushing. And it's really funny when I'm in Mexico and I can see that I am the one that's rushing. Everyone else is like, yeah, it'll happen. It'll happen on its time. There's this sense of calm and like, you're just moving along at life's pace, that what you're saying, the flow. And I really enjoy it. It can be hard for me to settle into it. And when I'm back here in the US, I had this experience where I was witnessing people rushing and being like, that's what I look like. That's what I am. I rush like them.
Also, I feel like you can always tell the Americans because we have big bottles of water. We're so obsessed with hydration in a way that nobody else in the world seems to be worried about.
And we take up so much space. We take up so much space.
We create a lot of trash. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a way of living that is just so, like, everything is so disposable.
Yeah. You said a friend was telling you.
A friend was telling me she was in Japan and she had sat down to eat something and she had like spread out the seat next to her on one side, the seat next to her on the other side. She had her stuff. She was eating a snack. And then a woman, like a Japanese woman, looks at her with her child and she realizes that she's taken up 3 seats. She has one person taken up 3. So she moves over to like give the other 2 to the woman and her child. And it was just like the woman was looking at her like, who would do that, right? Who would take up 3 seats? And yet that's what we do. Like in the airport, people are always taking up 3 or 4 seats. We take up more space. So what does that mean financially? Such a large portion of wealth is held in the US, right? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that you know, it's like we call it the American dream, for example, right? But like this is a land of abundance. And at the same time, it's a land of debt. It's a land of consumer debt. It's a land of student loans. It's a land of mortgages. And so it sometimes feels like an illusion that we are wealthy here because I don't even know how many of us really even own anything. Let's go back to my cousins, for example. They live in a home that was literally built by my family, right? And at some point, they will inherit these homes, they will inherit the land. There is something so powerful about being connected to your ancestral land, about and even when I say they will own the land, I'm using the word own, and I don't even necessarily mean that in a Western context. They will be the stewards of that land is probably a more accurate way to say it. Like, to me, in some ways, that is true wealth. You are connected to your land. You are a steward of this part of the earth that the generations before you were stewards of. There's just something, the way that we define abundance in the West, I think, could be questioned.
And you're in such an interesting place, Gigi, because you, I imagine, maybe I'm romanticizing your experience, but you can really trace back, like, this is where my family is literally from. I
Oh,
can
yeah.
too. I can see Sonora. I can see the desert. I know that my family's been there for 3 or 4 generations. But looking at my skin tone, there's more colonizer in me, right? So there's some people who are Spanish. Where did they come from? Who knows? You know,
Mm.
like, what was their story? How did they get to the northern part of Mexico? So I'm living more of the experience of my family arriving and rejecting the people who were already there to a certain degree. I There's a saying in Spanish, hay que mejorar la raza. Let's improve the race. It is white supremacy. It is hardcore white
Mm.
supremacy. Marry lighter.
Mm.
Reproduce with people with lighter skin. And that is a tactic that I can trace back 4 generations in my family, that the women literally found someone with, and that was not the only reason they married them. And I don't know how conscious that was, but that is the how we're living out colonialism, like the
Mhm.
proximity to power. The whiter you are, the better off you are. So for me, it's like I'm back in my ancestral land of Mexico, but how much of this is really mine, you know? And like, what is the culture that I will never have access to that is the culture that was there before we arrived in Sonora?
That is so fascinating. In your, I mean, yeah, I think when I was younger, again, I would have had maybe a different perspective, but I think now, as a middle-aged lady that's just trying to do the best that I can, I have a empathy for, these women in your family who, were making choices about what they're, as mothers, honestly, as mothers, what is the best thing I can do for my child? How can I give them the best opportunities? And maybe some of them were conscious of how effed up the concept even is, but still were choosing to try to secure the best possible future for their children. I'm just a lot more empathetic about that now in my middle age.
Oh, and I am too. I see it in the context that it's in. But I think when I realized this also in my 20s, I was like, we were doing this, right? Like, this is, and again, hearing the term said out loud. But how does all that relate to money? Well, the racial wealth divide, right? As much as the US is a land of opportunity, the opportunity is very unequal. And I know that those are, I mean, I'm sure that after this, you can give me like a list of the 50 episodes that you've gone into that probably outline the different things like redlining. You were talking about the Colored People's Campaign. And sometimes it can be hard to look at this information because it's painful, yet awareness creates the possibility of taking different choices.
Yes. And I think that, the intersectionality, that's basically what we're talking about now. When it comes to money, I mean, it affects every single part. My identity as a first generation American, as a Black woman, as a middle aged person, as a refugee to this country, all of those identities shape my relationship with money to the point that, for example, I got a raise. So I was doing some contract work some years ago and I got a big raise, a really big raise. And because of my identities and my understanding of how people like me have been exploited in our capitalistic society, my first thought wasn't, well, my first thought was, oh, I'm so happy about this raise. But when I tell you the second thought came in almost immediately, it was how much are they paying my white male peers? Am I being paid fairly? Or are they correcting a gap that existed before, and now they're either eliminating or reducing the pay gap that I was experiencing? So yeah, I mean, it shapes everything. It shapes our identities and how we view money. It is completely intertwined in my experience, whether or not you know that on a conscious level.
And I want to focus in on high sensitivity. So, one of the things that led me to think that maybe that's part of your identity is when you were talking about Mackenzie Scott and the way that she's deciding to give money. And you were looking at like describing what the difference is between billionaires and everyone else, right? Like how much wealth is concentrated by some people. And you said, I'm feeling a lot. There was something that you said out loud of like, you needed to take a minute because you had sensed it and it was overwhelming, right? And that is often part of being highly sensitive. Like there's a propensity to overwhelm because we see it so well. We feel it so strongly, so clearly. So I'd love to hear, like, is this a term that you'd heard before I started this podcast, before I reached out to you? Is this something that you're integrating now? What's been your experience with the term highly sensitivity?
Yeah, so I came across the term. So I read everything. I mean, my parents used to think I was just the most curious little kid because I would read books, and this is way back in the day, but they used to have these books where it would argue like pro and con, like for and against, and it'd be some topic like guns or legalizing drugs, recreational drugs. And so one of the books I came across, and this was some time ago, was about highly sensitive people. And do you know, is this, I don't know if this was like a popular text.
I mean, Ellen Aron is the woman who really popularized the term in the early 90s. And I don't know. I'm pretty new to the term myself, and I have not read everything, so I can't guess which book it was. But what was your experience of reading that book? Did it feel like it was part of you?
Yeah, I read everything. So like I've read books on how to quit smoking. I've never smoked anything a day in my life, but I just find information so fascinating. And so I'm reading this book, not thinking that it could be me. I'm just reading it the same way that I read books about, I think quitting drinking was another book. I went through this year where there was another year I was reading books written by veterans. I just want to understand people. So I didn't think I was reading about myself.
And I want to interrupt you there because that's one of the traits of high sensitivity is just wanting context. Like you want context for everything. Like, why are things the way they are? It's like insatiable curiosity, which is beautiful because you can make connections that other people may not be able to make. Like you really get to live their experience. But okay, so you're reading this book. You thought this is one of the many books that I'm reading because I'm curious.
Yeah. And then she said something about how highly sensitive people can look at another person sitting in a chair and pretty quickly figure out, oh, they need a cushion for their back. They're feeling a little bit cold. They would benefit from a blanket around their shoulders. Also, it's been a while since they had anything to drink. They might be thirsty. They'd benefit from a glass of water. And I was like, oh my goodness, you have clocked me 100%.
Wow. So just like that instant recognition of like, I can read people.
Yes. And not just read people, but determine what they need. I can have a pretty good guess for what they need.
I remember one time, maybe this was about a year ago, I was on a date with someone. It might have been like the first or second date. And this guy asked me, are you a psychic? I'm like, no, I just don't think, I didn't say this out loud, but it made me laugh. I was like, I don't think this man is very emotionally aware. Like I can tell what he's thinking, what he's going, what he's done. This is the second time I see him.
And no, I feel like the Gen Z question would have been like, are you a witch? I love that the young women now are like reclaiming this term.
No, I'm just sensitive. And like, I can tell from the three things you said and the way that you're acting with me, this is part of your story. But
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I first came. I was like, oh my goodness. Oh, you're right. Everybody can't do that. I mean, it was just this like, oh, I'm reading about myself right now. I thought I was just reading about other people.
and did you start to integrate that more? Because for myself, I rejected the term. I had struggled with my sensitivity. I rejected it because for me, it had been hard growing up sensitive. It wasn't really welcomed when I was a young
Mm,
child. And I thought it was a liability because it made me I couldn't read the news. I still can't. And then now I'm okay with the fact that like I'm not staying up to date with the current atrocity of the day. But at the time, it was a source of shame. Like other people
mm,
are stronger than I am, and here I am floored by everything. Like reading history for me was always really painful. Like, how are people doing this to each other? So I'm curious for you. Like, did you hold on to it and keep learning about it? Did you put it aside? Did you have to like? What was your experience with growing or integrating that part of yourself? Do you feel like it's fully integrated now?
yeah, it's funny you say that because I think culturally with the Eritrean culture that those types of characteristics are actually highly valued and highly rewarded. Being able to take care of other people, being able to see what they need, being able to accurately assess the energy in a room or in a conversation, and to be able to kind of adjust to that. So in some ways it's culturally, I think, and then especially for my gender, even more encouraged to kind of have these habits and traits. But here's the dark side of that is um I had to learn. At first I tried to reconcile it with more of a Western culture, and I tried to change myself. I tried to figure out if there were ways that I could be less sensitive. I remember literally trying to. So, one thing that maybe all of us have in common is I cannot be around someone who has very negative energy for a long time because it feels like it literally is seeping into my body. Literally, it feels that way. And I tried to change that for a few years. I tried to learn how to like one thing one thing I remember trying, so silly in retrospect, but this is how we learn. I tried to practice zoning out during conversations. LOL, which is hilarious because like I am the most intense listener when someone is talking to me, to the point that I will remember things they said years later, inconsequential things, by the way, but maybe their favorite thing to eat, or something about their childhood, or something they've always wanted. And so I tried to practice zoning out so that I literally wasn't hearing everything that didn't last long at all. So eventually, where I settled in is kind of, and this is also, I think, just maturity as a person, but starting to kind of embrace like, this is who I am and I love who I am. And now the job is to learn how to better take care of myself because I know that it's my nature to want to take care of others. So, how do I make that more sustainable? I'm not going to change that about myself, but how do I just better care for myself? So that's kind of where I am now. And that is, I don't think I'll ever be done learning about that. But I'm glad that I got the self rejection out of the way because that was exhausting.
I love that. Yeah, self-rejection, very exhausting because you're aware of everything and then you're aware that you're trying to zone out and it's like you're working twice as hard and yeah, there's nothing that can be gained from self-rejection. Yeah, let me think. One of the questions that usually want to start off with when I'm interviewing someone that is not really appropriate here because you went into it pretty naturally, but it was like, what was the financial background of your childhood, and how does that affect the work that you do today? And just reflecting back, what I've heard is that as someone who won the diversity lottery and was just insatiably curious, as you learned more about your finances, now Progressive Pockets is like a continued sharing of the things that you're learning. And I hear it be a way that you're taking care of yourself, you're learning for yourself and taking care of others by sharing what you've learned. And I want to put a shout out to your Billionaire Giving series because it can be so easy to judge people with money. And here you are shedding a light on how it is that they're giving, right? What it is that they're choosing to focus on. So I'm super excited to be sharing the space of financial content creating with you. I'm glad to also see how you embrace your sensitivity, how you're using that as a gift. I'll make sure to link to your website, but are there any other things you'd like to highlight or promote so that people can get in touch with you or support the work that you're doing?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, take a listen. Progressive Pockets, it's an audio only podcast, so it's wherever you get your audio podcasts. And then I have a newsletter like Deanna's that comes out about once a month or so. No spam, no filler, nothing like that. You're not going to get ads or whatever. But yeah, if there's anything I could ask for, it would be, I'm just curious to know what people want to know. So what is the next thing that I should go out and learn and research and come back and share? Those are always like the best episodes, or when people ask me questions.
Well, I haven't asked. I mean, you asked me, but what are the ways that highly sensitive people are different with their money? Right?
I was going to ask you the same question.
Well, you're the researcher. I love you. Yeah. I can just imagine you reading books about how to quit drinking and you're like, I'm not a drinker, but
like
how does this get done?
I mean, it's really been a pleasure to talk with you today. I really love listening to your show because it's just, I think that there's something about the space that you have created that allows people to get so vulnerable about their money and themselves and how they think about community and their place in it. And I just, once again, thank you for creating the space.
It was such a pleasure having Genet Jimba join us today. Her clarity and curiosity make this work feel grounded and doable. I really enjoyed hearing how her activism has matured and how she now sees the trade-offs we're navigating day in and day out. While as individuals we cannot solve systemic issues, Gigi reminds us that we still have power to change minds and hearts with our money decisions. From boycotts to divestments, we can affect change.
Thank you for joining me on Highly Sensitive Money. I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, and I hope this episode helped you see how money and sensitivity can work together while honoring our interconnected well-being. We have the power to create a system where everyone's needs are met because nature is abundant. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with someone who could benefit. Your support helps this message reach more people navigating their own financial journeys. A thank you goes to Mike Schul for the music and Juan Antonio Nunez for producing. For more resources on bringing money and social justice together, sign up for my monthly newsletter over at allthecolors.net. I also invite you to schedule a free 30-minute call where we can talk about money coaching, investment management, and all things money and social justice. Until next time, remember that your sensitivity and deep thinking is your superpower.